I'm gonna rank every brawler in Brawl Stars right now, all 54 of them, from worst to best. This is a competitive tier list specifically geared toward the competitive scene in Power League and Club League. And I really wanted to thank these 22 pro players for helping out with this, and this is gonna really help you guys know which brawlers you wanna focus on upgrading right now. First up are our F tier brawlers, which are not competitive, so you should probably honestly just avoid playing them. And for starters, we got Penny, the worst brawler in the game. At least I think there's a really solid argument for that, okay? Her super takes a long time to charge, and it is very easily countered by a lot of brawlers that are very meta right now, like Belle, Grom, or other throwers. Without her super, she deals very little damage, and she just struggles competitively. Also in the F tier is El Primo. El Primo just isn't as good as he used to be. It's really hard for you to charge up a super because he has such a short range, even when you compare him to other tanks. But unlike Edgar or Buzz, who also have short attack ranges, the only way to charge it without actually hitting a target is to get hit by an enemy, which is never good because that just ends up charging the enemy supers. Just like El Primo, Edgar finds himself in the F tier as well. Now, Edgar actually has less of a range than El Primo does, but he does have the benefit of his super actually charging over time. But Edgar is still really easy to play around, and in the competitive meta, he gets hard countered by high damaging brawlers that have long ranges like Spike or Meg or Lola that you see all over the place. Mr. P is also going into the F tier. Now, Mr. P does have a pretty good range, but he still struggles to charge his super since most of his attacks only hit one time. His porters are actually like really good at countering a few brawlers, but he doesn't deal enough damage to land anywhere other than the F tier. Also in the F tier is Lou. Now, if you can hit all of your shots with Lou's attack, then yeah, he's actually pretty good, but it's actually really hard for you to charge up his super against a lot of the meta brawlers. And while his super can be easily avoided on his maps, there are actually a couple where his super is really powerful, and I actually almost put him into the C tier, but he feels pretty good for F tier right now. Next, we have our C tier brawlers who aren't necessarily as bad as our F tier brawlers, but who also aren't really worth playing competitively. It makes me sad to say that starting off in the C tier, we have Carl. And honestly, Carl's actually really close to being into the F tier, but he did get a recent buff to his super, which is why I think the C tier is good. His attack still seems to be a little too slow for how much damage it deals, and it makes it very easy to approach him and actually take him out. And in the C tier, I know I'm gonna make people unhappy with this, but we got Dynamite as well. Dynamite probably struggles more than any other brawler against the speed gears, and especially if you got a level 3 speed gear. Like, Dynamite just cannot hit somebody in the bushes when they've got that level 3 speed gear equipped, and even a level 1 does a really good job at countering Dynamite. Now, throwers are never completely useless, at least not usually, but with some good aim, he can deal a lot of damage, which is why he's not in the F tier. Okay, now this is kind of surprising, and the pros did agree that Shelly now has a place out of the F tier. And it's not necessarily because Shelly's actually good, it's because some of the tanks are moving way up in the meta, and she's probably the best counter pick against a tank. She's not useful in any other situation, but she can be used as an anti-tank brawler. There are better anti-tank brawlers most of the time. She can be used. She's just not completely useless right now. Next in the C tier, we have Squeak. Squeak does a pretty good job at controlling small areas, but his attacks are pretty easy to avoid, and they don't deal enough damage to make him a really big threat. Also, it's really easy to avoid his super, and so the C tier kind of makes sense for him. Next, we've got Bo in the C tier as well. Bo has some pretty good area control, and he can actually deal a lot of damage if all of his arrows or all of his mines hit you, right? But it can be easy to avoid his arrows, and if you know where his mines are placed, then they're pretty much useless because a pro player is going to be able to easily disarm them. Colt's also making his way into the C tier. He does a lot of damage, and he has good range and could actually move up a tier or two if people practice a lot with him. Like, if you're insanely good with Colt, like, he's insane, right? But generally, Colt's attack is one of the hardest in the game to use most of the time, and he's really easy to play against, which is why he fits himself into the C tier right now. Next, we got Nita, also in the C tier. Now, unlike Colt, Nita's attacks are very easy to use and can deal some decent damage to multiple targets. Her bear can also cause big problems for a lot of brawlers, but it can be very difficult for her to charge one up because of her short range. We've also got Colette in the C tier. Now, Colette is also a really good counter against tanks, but she really struggles against the smaller brawlers, the brawlers that have less HP, that have a lot of range to kind of outrange her, okay? Her super deals massive damage, but she's vulnerable the whole time, and it makes her an easy target, which is why she's in the C tier right now. Also in the C tier is Bull. Bull's attacks don't reach very far, but it deals so much damage up close that he can be a decent choice in Heist against the right brawlers, and so C tier, he kind of works sometimes, somewhat. Also in the C tier, we've got Ash. Now, ever since Ash stopped charging tons of rage from taking damage, it's been way harder for him to get his rage charged up. He is really scary if he has full rage, but he's not nearly as consistent as he used to be. And another brawler that isn't consistent, well, she is consistent, she's just consistently not that great, is Jackie in the C tier. She would actually probably be a little bit lower on this list if she didn't get her gadget, like, speeds her up and makes her a little bit more effective, and also the fact that there is the speed gear in the game, which she can use to her advantage a lot better than a lot of other brawlers. And she can be used in some maps sometimes against certain brawlers, but but for right now, C tier fits good for Jackie. Surprise, surprise, 8-Bit is also going in the C tier. Now, 8-Bit obviously deals a lot of damage and he has very good range. However, he didn't really get a lot of help from any of the new gears. In fact, he's kind of got worse because a lot of the other brawlers really benefit from gears and he struggles against them now because of it. And now we have the B tier brawlers. Now, B tier brawlers are ones that do have some competitive use on specific maps or specific modes or with the right teammates or to counter certain brawlers. And you will see them sometimes in competitive matches, but there are other brawlers in the A tier or S tier that are generally better. And kicking off the B tier, we have Barley. Now, if the enemy team doesn't have a counter to Barley, he's actually insanely good. But a lot of brawlers that have abilities that have been added to the game that counter him. So if you're playing Power League or Club League, there's a good chance that you'll actually struggle if you pick him, unless you pick him last, in which case, congratulations on your win. After Barley in the B tier, we have BB in the B tier. BB is a little bit better than the average tank because of her first star power that makes her faster than like most brawlers. And there can be better options, but she's not actually awful right now in the right map or mode. And as a decent counter against tanks, we also have Amber. She can deal a lot of damage very quickly. However, keep in mind that she does get countered by long-range meta brawlers. So if you've got like a Bell on the enemy team, you probably shouldn't be playing Amber. She also gets her super countered by like Poco, Byron, or Pam, who can heal their teammates before they die. But if none of those brawlers are there to counter Amber, Amber's actually really good. Next in the B tier, we've got Tick. Tick is always going to be annoying, right? And there are better options than him, like with Grom or Sprout. Those are like two really good throwers and they're better than Tick in most situations right now. However, he does still have a place, so you can consider him. Next in the B tier, we have Jessie. Now, Jessie can potentially deal tons of damage with her attack if it bounces, and she can deal tons of damage with her super if it's ignored. She's also great at countering brawlers that spawn things like Pam or 8-Bit, but she does get countered by throwers who can easily take out her turret from a distance, and other brawlers that can also get rid of her turret like Belle. Next, we have Gale in the B tier. Actually, a little bit better than I thought he was, and the reason why he has moved up is because of the same reason Shelly has. He may not be as good at countering tanks as Shelly, but he's still a great counter for them, and he's also not so bad against the other meta brawlers, so he's actually a little bit more of a safer choice than Shelly is, especially if the enemy team has 1 or 2 tanks on their team with another brawler or 2 that don't outrange Gale. Next in the B tier, we've got Griff. Now, Griff has one of the best supers in the game, but just like Amber, he really struggles against those long-range meta brawlers like Spike, right? He has a ton of potential to deal a lot of damage with his main attack, but it can be very difficult to get all of his coins to hit from that distance. Also in the B tier, we've got B and BB and Barley. Okay, I'm sorry. B is very squishy, but she does have a long enough range to safely hit shots against most brawlers. She's not the best long-range brawler, but she's a good brawler to consider if the enemy team has both long-range brawlers and tanks on their team because she's so good at countering those tanks. Next in the B tier is Nani. Now, Nani's main attack is honestly really difficult to maximize damage with, but she has great range and her super lets her safely take out squishy brawlers anywhere on the map, which makes her an excellent choice on bounty. Next in the B tier is Colonel Ruffs. Colonel Ruffs does really well on maps with lots of walls, and honestly, I pick him whenever I'm facing an enemy Rico because his gadget actually allows him to counter Rico pretty well. He doesn't deal very much damage, but his super is very powerful, especially if Colonel Ruffs focuses on boosting his teammates instead of himself, because his attack doesn't deal a lot of damage in the first place. But if you play Colonel Ruffs right and against the right brawlers, he's actually pretty good. Next in the B tier is Brock. Now, the nerf to Brock's projectile speed made his shots way easier to avoid, so he got bumped down from last tier list quite a bit, okay? He's still good, just not great. Next in B tier is Surge. Surge is a great brawler, but only on maps that allow him to charge his super early on in the match. His gadget does help him a lot with that, especially if he's facing off against throwers. Next in B tier is Poco. Poco's got a lot of health, and he is one of the easiest brawlers in the game to use. He's definitely not a damage dealer, so don't use him if you need to deal a lot of damage against a tanky brawler, but if the map is all about area control, you can actually get a lot of value out of him, especially if you have tankier teammates. Next, we got Ems in the B tier, and Ems is another really safe counter to tank since her main attack deals massive damage and she actually has some decent range. She's not very reliable on open maps where the enemy can outrange her or like split up, so she has to deal with you on a one-on-one basis, so definitely keep that in mind. Also in the B tier is Gene. Now, I put him in the B tier because his super is honestly probably always going to be useful. He can make or break gem grab matches, like seriously, but he doesn't deal as much damage as he used to with his main attack, and it's a little bit harder for him to face brawlers in a 1v1 now. We also have Max in the B tier, And Max's super is very similar to Jean's. It's pretty much always going to be useful, and she's already one of the fastest brawlers in the game. Now, I would have put her in the A tier, but it actually seems like the speed gear has allowed all other brawlers to kind of keep up with her boosted speed a bit. I mean, if you're playing on a map with a lot of bushes, that speed gear is better than having a Max on your team usually. Now, at the end of the B tier and almost into the A tier, we have Fang. At the time of recording this, Fang was not in the hands of many of the pros, okay? I probably played him more than any of the pros, so I had to go up with my gut on him, and honestly, I haven't played him that much. He is good, but I wouldn't say that he's amazing competitively, because in those really competitive matches, the enemies are going to keep their distance away from Fang, and it's really hard to hit his shoes from a long distance. Even though you can, it's hard, and that makes it difficult for you to charge up his super. And even after he does have his super charged, it can be really risky to use it if he can't take out all of his enemies in one blow, because he will very likely run out of ammo and not be able to deal with them when they're all bunched up. He could be an A tier brawler, but for right now, I feel like B tier is a safe place to put him. And next up are the A tier brawlers. These are brawlers that are very good for the competitive meta in a lot of maps and on a lot of modes. Like, these are really excellent brawlers. You'll see a lot of them in competitive matches, but they're not as overwhelmingly strong as the S tier brawlers. And kicking off at the bottom of the A tier, we have Frank. Frank is the tankiest brawler in the game, and it's not even close. He also has the furthest range out of all of the tanks, and he has a devastating super. Like, team wipe, game breaking, game winning super. But he does have that drawback of that delay with his attack and his super, and he can be countered by a lot of brawlers. But right now, he's actually pretty good according to the pros. He can be pretty devastating. Next in the A tier, we have Crow. Now, Crow is not only a great counter pick against tanks, but he also counters healers, and there are a lot of high tier healers. There are also even some maps where he's just a solid choice specifically because of his ability to slow an entire enemy team for 5 seconds thanks to his gadget. I mean, it's insane. He does take a little skill to learn exactly how to use, and you have to be careful about not supering onto the enemy when you shouldn't, but he can be good. Next in the A tier is Piper. Piper's one of the most solid picks for the long range matches because she shoots really far, and her damage at max range is just insane, right? Her super also gets her out of really sketchy situations, so she's really good for holding large bounties and lots of gems. Man, and I love seeing this Mortis right there in the A tier. Yes. Mortis has had some really great buffs recently, and now gears have helped him out a lot. Like, Mortis is insane. He's obviously great against throwers and also against those squishy brawlers since he can dodge very well and defeat most of them within his first 3 dashes. And he takes a little skill to play, like a lot of brawlers do, but he's insane. Also in the A tier is Byron, another amazing brawler. On top of having one of the longest ranges in the game, he can heal his teammates and himself with his gadget, right? His super also makes him a really good counter against tanks if he has that Malaise star power equipped as well. Denying them healing for like 9 seconds can really force a tank to fall back. And I'll be happy to admit that I was wrong about the Malaise star power. Against tanks, it's actually pretty solid. Next in A tier, we have Belle. Now, not a lot of brawlers can outrange Belle, and her attack deals a good amount of damage no matter how far away she is from her enemies. She forces enemies also to like stay spread out, and that's actually like, it's really punishing when they don't spread out, and that also makes her pretty good in heist. She also has a way to counter tanks with her super, because if she hits those tanks with her super, they get marked, and it's almost like they want to die because they become so ineffective because they take so much damage until they die again. So she's also really solid for the meta right now. Next in the A tier, we have Sprout. Now, Sprout is a great brawler for maps with lots of walls, and since its super can completely seal off certain pathways and areas, it's actually a really solid choice for a lot of the game modes. In fact, Sprout is arguably the second best thrower right now for good reason. Next, we have Lola in the A tier. Now, Lola's had multiple nerfs since she was released, and she's still a very strong brawler. And it's interesting because from what I've seen from pro players, they are still placing her super right beside her, even though the extra damage, it gets decreased when it's within that close proximity of her. I guess the total damage is still really crazy and is definitely worth using it when she has that shade right next to her. Next in the A tier, we have Pam. Pam has a lot of health. Her super keeps herself alive, it keeps teammates alive, she can deal a lot of damage up close, and she can prevent healing from a fairly long range. Pam isn't particularly amazing at any one thing, but she is amazingly well-rounded, and she's actually pretty good right now. In fact, you can pretty much play her in any of the game modes, and so she's a solid one to like really over-level right now, in my opinion. Like, get her to level 11, max out some gears on her, and that's a solid brawler that you can count on. That's not like gonna be banned very often, it's not gonna be picked very often. Like, she's kind of a surprise good brawler to upgrade. Next, we got Tara in in the A tier as well. Now, Terra's super is so much of a game changer that the A tier fits her pretty well right now, especially if you play her in Gem Grab, Brawl Ball, or even Hot Zone. Her super is always amazing, and it kind of depends on how easy it is for you to charge that up, but right now, A tier seems to fit for her. Next in the A tier, we have Stu. Now, Stu deals a lot of burst damage from a pretty good distance, and he's actually he is probably the most evasive brawler in the game thanks to his super. I mean, there's an argument with him versus Mortis, but you get the idea. He takes a bit of skill to use, but he is very unpredictable to the enemy team, and a skilled Stu will absolutely wreck his enemies. Also in the A tier is Rico. Nobody shuts down a narrow pathway better than Rico. It's like, if there's a narrow pathway, it's off limits if an enemy Rico is defending it. And there are actually quite a few maps in the competitive rotation right now in Club League and Power League where he actually kind of fits. He's got great star powers, and his bouncy castle gadget is easily one of the best gadgets in the game right now. Next in the A tier, we have Leon. And Leon's lollipop drop gadget is another very strong one, and his entire team has a huge advantage for however long it remains on the map. Even though it does decay over a period of time, like, you want to focus on getting rid of it because it's so good. His super is also really great for sneaking up on those squishy brawlers that are actively pretty strong right now. And it does take some skill to use, but if you can play Leon pretty well, he's actually really good. Next in the A tier, we have Buzz. And Buzz has everything that a good assassin needs. A strong attack, lots of health, a quick way to travel long distances, and the ability for him to charge up his super without actually having to hit a brawler. Not to mention the fact that his stun, I mean, you got an argument to say that his stun makes him the most effective assassin in the game right now. Next in the A tier, we have Sandy. Now, Sandy recently had a nerf to his supercharge rate, and it's honestly the only thing keeping him out of the S tier. He's not as good as he used to be, but he is still very good. He benefits a lot from the speed gear, and his super is still one of the best in the game. So A tier is definitely good for him. And finally, we have the S tier brawlers. These brawlers are the best of the best and are particularly strong right now, pretty much on any map or mode. And starting off in the S tier, we have Daryl. A recent buff to his Steel Hoops star power allows Daryl to keep a weak shield for a few seconds after using his super. And with this shield, there are not very many 1v1 situations where Daryl isn't going to win after rolling into combat. Also, thanks to his extremely high damage, Daryl is very good right now. And in the S tier, we have Rosa, okay? Rosa is also really good right now. The speed gear has probably helped Rosa more than any other brawler in the game because it's all about being in the bush, and the bush is where Rosa thrives. Most brawlers can't even escape after entering Rosa's range, and now that she can be even faster than pretty much any brawler, she is very hard to avoid. In fact, I've played Rosa more than any other brawler in Power League and Club League ever since I got her to level 11 and got that level 3 speed gear on her. And let me tell you guys, she is insane. She's insane. She's unfair. She's unfair, okay? She does require bushes, so I don't play her on every single map, but where she is strong, she's insane. She's game breaking. She's OP. Also OP right now is Spike. And I don't necessarily think this is because Spike is super strong. I think it's in order to counter really strong tanks like Daryl and Rosa. But Spike can't only counter tanks, right? He can also counter throwers thanks to his super, and he does a lot of damage against a lot of brawlers that deal a lot of damage from long range, right? I wouldn't say that Spike himself is the best, most meta brawler right now, but he's one of the best counters to the most meta brawlers right now, which is what makes him so good. Next in the S tier, we have Meg. Meg is another brawler that is just, she's really good. She's really good. She can charge her super up pretty quickly because of how fast her projectiles are and the fact that they reach actually like a long range. And after she gets that first supercharge, the rest of the match is going to be an uphill struggle for the enemy team because she's just so strong. And that mecha, let me tell you guys, it's insane. But the best brawler in the game right now, by far, in fact, by a landslide, is Grom. Grom is just too strong right now. In fact, I would not be surprised if soon after I release this, he got some sort of an emergency nerf. He's an insane long-range brawler. He's an insane damage dealer. He's an insane thrower. It's extremely difficult to dodge his attacks, and you can pretty much auto-aim both his attack and super and still hit the majority of his shots. And there you have it, every brawler ranked from worst to best. Just as a reminder for the order, Penny is the worst of the F tier, Lou's the best of the F tier, Carl's the worst of the C, 8-Bit is the best of the C, and you get the idea. Fang is the best of the B, Sandy's the best of the A, Grom is the best of the S. I know it's a little bit mixed up, but you get the idea. I'm really curious to know what you guys thought about this style of the tier list compared to how I normally do it. This way required way less time, and I feel like it was almost as helpful as how I normally do it, but I want to create the content you guys want, so let me know down below. And feel free to let me know if there's anything on this tier list that you disagree with. But just remember that these 22 pros helped me out, and I want to give a huge thank you to them for helping solidify this tier list. Make sure you guys subscribe for some more Brawl Stars tier lists right here, and also some Clash Mini content right there. We also got Free Fire content that's going to be on that channel, and we got an awesome Brawl Stars video that you guys are going to want to check out. I appreciate you guys using code Kairos in the Brawl Stars shop, and for now, this is KairosTime ticking by. We will see you in Brawl Stars.